Today we're going to learn what is Hamas. Hamas is a Palestinian political party and armed resistance movement based in the besieged Gaza Strip. It emerged in 1987 after the First Intifada as a reaction to intensifying Israeli violence and as a religious alternative to the secular Palestinian parties that dominated the scene at the time. Hamas was originally a branch of Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood, but later cut ties with it and became an independent group. In 1992, Hamas formed a military wing called the Izz al-Din al-Qassam Brigades to resist the Israeli occupation. The brigades carried out several significant operations against Israel during the Second Intifada, which established Hamas as a leading force in the Palestinian resistance. Hamas is composed of a political wing and a military wing. They each perform different functions but operate under the same leadership structure. I'm absolutely not going to read these because I don't want to butcher the names, but pause to read. The Political Bureau sets general policy. The brigades conduct military operations. Shura Council handles affairs in Gaza, the West Bank, diaspora, and Israeli prisons. And Gaza's government enacts policies and provides social services to people in Gaza. What does Hamas want? Its 2017 charter states that its current political program is to implement the right to return for all Palestinian refugees, establish a temporary Palestinian state along the 1967 borders, the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip, and arrange a long-term truce with Israel. Hamas considers the establishment of a Palestinian state on the 67 borders as a temporary step. It refuses to recognize Israel's legitimacy and advocates for the full and complete liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea. Hamas's 2017 charter states that its struggle is against the Israeli state and the Zionist movement due to their occupation of Palestine, not Jewish people, and criticizes Israel for associating its actions with Jewish values. Hamas's stated goals for its current operation are to free the thousands of Palestinian prisoners held by Israel, end the Gaza blockade, and end the status quo where Israel continues its occupation without cost. Does Hamas control Gaza? Not really. Hamas administers local affairs while Israel controls much of Gaza from the outside through its blockade. Israel forcibly controls airspace, sea access, movement of all goods and people in and out, telecoms networks, electromagnetic sphere, tax distribution, population registry, water, and electricity and fuel. Hamas began governing Gaza in 2007 and has since managed healthcare, education, infrastructure, social welfare, law enforcement, and public employment. Hamas is not a sovereign government. Israel's blockade prevents Palestinians from independently exercising sovereignty over Gaza's population, development, and economy. Does Hamas represent Palestine? Hamas is one of many Palestinian political parties. On the one hand, Hamas was democratically elected by voters in 2006, garnering a plurality of West Bank and Gaza votes, 44%, for its social services and resistance efforts. Today, Fatah and Hamas, the two largest parties, are roughly tied, each enjoying the support of a third of the public. On the other hand, many Palestinians strongly criticize Hamas's political wing due to its corruption and repressive policies, and the last elections were in 2006. 43% of Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza believe that no party represents Palestine. However, Hamas is currently the only major group that pursues armed resistance, which is widely supported. So while most Palestinians might not support Hamas as a party, the overwhelming majority support acts of resistance in general, whether by Hamas or others. Is Hamas a proxy of Iran? No. Hamas is an independent group with a political program and military strategy distinct from Iran. Hamas and Iran are strategic allies, meaning that while Iran provides Hamas with significant financial, military, and political support, Hamas does not act or operate on behalf of Iran. It makes decisions based on its own interests and independently manages relationships with countries like Turkey, Qatar, and Egypt. For example, in 2012, Hamas cut ties with Syria because it opposed the Assad regime's violent crackdown on protesters. It took this decision despite angering Iran, a close ally of Assad. Regarding Operation Al-Aqsa flood, even Israeli officials admit there is no evidence that Iran was in any way involved. Iran was actually surprised by it. Hamas independently coordinated and launched the operation to achieve its own goals. Does Hamas negotiate with Israel? Hamas views armed struggle as only one of several tools to end apartheid and occupation, such as diplomacy. In 2006, in an op-ed for The Guardian, Hamas chairman revealed that Israel refused Hamas's proposal for a truce. In 2008, former Hamas chief offered a 10-year truce in exchange for a sovereign Palestinian state along the 1967 borders with Jerusalem as its capital. Israel rejected the proposal. In 2015, Hamas offered a long-term truce in exchange for simply ending the Gaza blockade. Israel rejected it. In 2018, Hamas chairman revived this offer by sending a handwritten letter in Hebrew to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, but Israel rejected it again. Israel repeatedly rejected Hamas's diplomatic initiatives because Israel saw no reason to end the oppressive status quo, which it believed gave it power and privileges over Palestinians with minimal downsides. Israel's benefits outweigh the costs. Hamas is trying to change that. Is Hamas risking Palestinian lives? Westerners often accuse Hamas of risking Palestinian lives by fighting apartheid and thus inviting deadly Israeli crackdown. But the reality is that Israel's blockade is slowly killing everyone in Gaza. We have paid a high cost in lives in this conflict, but if that's the price for long-term changes, breaking the siege and obtaining freedom, it's one many of us feel we have no choice but to swallow. We are bleeding here anyway. The Gaza blockade crushes any opportunity for peace. That Hamas is responsible for Israel's killing of Palestinians is malicious. It blames the victims for resisting apartheid and absolves the oppressors of responsibility, treating the mass killing of children as normal Israeli response. You don't need to support Hamas as a political party to support Palestine. Most Palestinians don't support it as a party. But Hamas is an effective political player in the struggle against apartheid, oppression, and colonization. It has achieved remarkable success in preventing Israeli violence in Jerusalem and freeing Palestinian hostages abducted by Israel. Hamas has institutions, ministries, student movements, and women's movements, and employs thousands of doctors, teachers, judges, and aid workers. It is part of the fabric of Palestinian society. So while you don't need to support Hamas to support Palestine, you cannot oppose oppression while supporting the resistance to it. You cannot support freedom while supporting Israeli efforts to wipe out those who fight for the freedom, including Hamas, to leave Palestinians defenseless.